This ball is crushed.
You're listening to the New York Yankees Recaps podcast, where we're talking New York Yankees baseball all season long. Recaps of big games, the best home run calls, trades, rumors, and what's happening down on the farm. Every game, all season long.
So the 1998 New York Yankees team was probably the best team I've ever seen in my life. I don't think that's a stretch. I mean, they won 125 games, including the postseason. That's a major league record. Their regular season record of 114 wins stood for a few years until the Mariners broke it. However, the Mariners were knocked out of the playoffs by the Yankees. And the 1998 team, they didn't have a ton of dominant players at the time. They just seemed like a bunch of solid guys, a good group. But ultimately, they have at least 3 Hall of Famers once Derek Jeter gets elected later this winter. Tim Raines, Derek Jeter, and Mariano Rivera. Maybe a 4th if Andy Pettitte ever gets in. I don't know if he will. He may eventually. Perhaps from the Modern Era Committee. He had a 60 WAR lifetime, which is pretty good. 256 career wins, a postseason record of 19-11, 276 postseason innings, 7 World Series appearances, 5 rings, almost a 6th with Houston. He does have the black mark of admitting to using performance-enhancing drugs, but he said that it was just to come back from an injury. He did have the elbow injury, but when he came back, he was dominant. And part of that was due to training with Roger Clemens, but part of it was due to PEDs, I'm sure, and that's going to hurt his Hall of Fame chances. I feel like Bernie Williams should have gotten into the Hall of Fame. He was knocked off after 1 ballot, I think. He was the center fielder and cleanup hitter for the 4 World Series teams. Class act, switch hitter, very clutch player. He walked off Game 1 of 2 different American League Championship series in a span of 4 years, 96 and then 99, against the Orioles and then the Red Sox. Bernie Williams doesn't get enough credit. He was off the ballot way too soon. So, before the 1998 season, the big offseason acquisitions were Chili Davis, the switch-hitting DH, who didn't play much for the Yankees that year. He only hit 3 home runs. He was injured. He had a knee injury. And then Chuck Knobloch. Nobby was acquired for top prospect Eric Milton, who at the time was the Yankees' best pitching prospect. He was the 20th pick in the first round during the 1996 championship season. And he put up pretty good numbers in the minor leagues. He was being compared to the aforementioned Andy Pettitte. I remember thinking that the trade might have been a mistake when Eric Milton began 2-0 with a 0.71 ERA, and he had gotten a ton of hype in spring training in Minnesota. And Knobloch got off to a slow start with the Yankees, as many Yankees do. I mean, it's tough to transition to New York City, especially from a place like Minnesota. Another big move for the Yankees that offseason was the ascension of Brian Cashman, who was then 31 years old, to the position of general manager, replacing then GM Bob Watson, who stepped down. That's amazing to me. Brian Cashman started as an intern. He was in the mailroom or something. And now he's been the GM for over 20 years, and a damn good one at that. Nobody does trades like Brian Cashman. He wins way more than he loses. And he's really good at picking up those scrap heap guys like Luke Voigt and Mike Tauchman, Gio Urshela. He's good at using the analytics to determine, who he should go out and get and who will be valuable to the Yankees in the future. So I think that type of thing only comes with experience. You see a lot of GMs, like when they first get the job, go out and make the big spend or go out and make the big trade for prospects for a big slugger or a big pitcher. But it's the little moves that move your team forward a little bit at a time that add up to make a great organization. Before the 1998 season started, George Steinbrenner, who was known to apply a bit of pressure from time to time, Anyway, he said to Joe Torre, has a team ever gone undefeated before, 162-0? Of course they hadn't. But Steinbrenner didn't realize how close he would be to the historic nature of this team. The Yankees did not go undefeated, but they actually started off 0-3 and 1-4 before righting the ship and putting together an historic championship season. So I want to go over the lineup, the main players that were on that team, beginning with catcher. So time was split between Jorge Posada and Joe Girardi. Posada was entering his age 26 season. This was his first full year. He played in 111 games, had 409 plate appearances, 358 at-bats, 17 home runs, 63 RBIs, 268 batting average, 824 OPS, 115 OPS plus, and he split with Joe Girardi, who was entering his age 33 season. Girardi appeared in 78 games, mostly defensive work. He had 254 at-bats, 276 average, 3 homers and 31 RBIs. I love Girardi. He was a scrappy little player, but Posada, when he first came up, was a monster. Switch hitter, enormous power. I remember his first home run was in Kansas City, and I think he hit it into the fountains, which is a long way. Entering his third season as the Yankees' first baseman after replacing Don Mattingly was Tino Martinez, coming off a career year in which he had 44 home runs in 1997. He was entering his age 30 season. He had 608 plate appearances in 142 games. Hit just 28 home runs, had 123 RBIs, 281 batting average, 860 OPS, 124 OPS plus. Tino was off to a great start, but if you remember, and I'll get into this later, he got drilled by a 100-mile-an-hour fastball from Armando Benitez in the famous Brawl game. And after that, he kind of slowed down. He wasn't the same after that incident. He did have the big grand slam in the World Series, though. I'll get to that as well. Chuck Knobloch played second base. He was entering his age 29 season. Played 150 games. Hit a disappointing 265, but he did have a 361 on-base percentage. At that point, a career-high 17 home runs. He was accused later on of taking PEDs, and you wonder if he did it during the season because his power numbers jumped up. He had 25 doubles, 4 triples, walked 76 times. I remember he used to get hit by pitches a lot. He had stolen 62 bases with Minnesota the year before, but he cut that in half to just 31 bases. However, to be fair to Chucky, he didn't really need to steal a lot of bases on this team. This team was stacked, and they had a good offense without him stealing bases. He had Derek Jeter hitting behind him. Jeter played shortstop, of course. He was 24 years old, played 149 games, 626 at-bats, 203 hits, 19 home runs, 84 RBIs, struck out 119 times, 324 batting average for Derek Jeter, 864 OPS, 127 OPS plus. Jeter was solid, so, he had that great rookie season where he batted .314, had a bit of a sophomore slump, though not much. I think he hit .291 with 10 home runs, and then this year he really busts out, showcased a little bit of power to his game, 19 home runs, which was pretty good for a shortstop back then. Now everybody hits 40 home runs. Scott Brosius playing third base. He was picked up as the player to be named later in the Kenny Rogers deal. If you remember, the Yankees signed Kenny Rogers prior to the 96 season. Didn't have a great 96. I think he was 12-8 with a 4.68 ERA. Just from memory, I could be wrong there. But really struggled. 6-7 with an ERA over 5 in 1997. So they dealt him. They just decided that, his temperament was not ready for the bright lights of New York. It really bothered me when he shut them down in the playoffs in 2006, and he had all that pine tar on his hand. Left field was kind of a cacophony of players. They had Chad Curtis entering his age 29 season. He hit .243 with 10 homers. He did get on base a lot, .355 on base percentage. They also had Ricky Leday, 24-year-old prospect, hit .241 with 1 home run, 12 RBIs. I remember his 1 home run was off of Mike Messina in, I think, his second or third game, and it was in Baltimore. I was surprised he didn't hit for more power. He had a great swing. Also, in September, they called up Shane Spencer, or Shane Home Run Dispenser, in his age 26 season. Big, strong kid, batted .373 with a .411 on-base percentage, 1.321 OPS, 10 home runs, 27 RBIs, in just 67 at-bats. Holy shnikes. Yeah, Spencer was great, and then he dominated in the American League Division Series, and I think he hit another home run in the ALCS. Center field, Bernie Williams, already mentioned him. He won the batting title that year, .339 batting average in his age 29 season, 26 home runs, 97 RBIs. Missed a significant amount of time after sliding into third and injuring his left knee. Playing right field, number 21, Paul O'Neill. Number 21. O'Neill was aging at this time. He was entering his age 35 season. But it didn't slow him down. He had perhaps his best year. He hit .317 with 24 home runs and 116 RBIs in 602 at-bats. He had 40 doubles, 2 triples, and 15 stolen bases. So O'Neill is not a guy you thought of with blazing speed. I mean, he was a good outfielder. He had a good arm. He played right field really well at Yankee Stadium, but he was more of just a good base runner. He knew when to go. Walked 57 times, struck out 103 times. One thing you'll notice if you go back and look at the stats from this team, only 2 players struck out over 100 times, Derek Jeter and Paul O'Neill. At DH, getting a bulk of the at-bats, was Darryl Strawberry. He played in 101 games. He had 295 at-bats and 24 home runs, good for an .896 OPS, just 57 RBIs, 90 strikeouts, .247 batting average, 132 OPS plus. By the way, I just looked at Bernie Williams' OPS plus, 160. Jesus. He really should be in the Hall of Fame. Another DH had 382 plate appearances, was the aging Tim Raines in his age 38 season. Batted .290 with 5 homers and 47 RBIs, 8 stolen bases, walked 55 times, struck out 49 times. Luis Sojo. Louie. He batted .231. Wasn't known for his stick. He was a good defensive player, utility guy, playing all over the place. No home runs, 14 RBIs. Chili Davis, .291, 3 homers, 9 RBIs, just filling in at DH when he wasn't injured. Ricky Leday, .241, 1 homer, 12 RBIs. Homer Bush, base runner extraordinaire, batted .380 in his age 25 season, was dealt for David Wells the following preseason. I really liked Homer Bush, and I was disappointed when they moved him. He had only 78 at-bats, but he had 27 hits, 3 doubles, 6 stolen bases, 5 walks, struck out just 19 times. Dale Swaim, I forgot about him. He became a coach with the Brewers, I believe. Batted just .155, no home runs, 3 RBIs in his age 30 season. Did not last long with the Yankees. Mike Lowell. You might remember him from the Red Sox. He came up with the Yankees that season. He was a big prospect. Brian Cashman later said that that was his biggest regret, trading Mike Lowell for a pitcher from the Marlins. I believe his name was Ed Yarnall, and he was a left-handed pitcher, an Eric Milton type. Never did anything with the Yankees. But Mike Lowell appeared in 8 games, had 15 at-bats. He was 4 for 15, good for a .267 average. No extra base hits, no RBIs. And Mike Figa, backup catcher. He was the 3rd catcher on the roster. Another prospect. Had just 4 at-bats, 1 for 4 with a strikeout. Now, the thing I remember most about the pitching from the 98 team was David Wells came back off of a, okay season in 97. He was 18-4 with a 3.49 ERA, and of course he pitched that perfect game on May 17th. I'll talk about that later. Andy Pettitte was 16-11 in his age 26 season, 4.24 ERA. Bit of a step back. I think he was tired. He had pitched into the postseason each of his first 2 years, actually each of his first 3 years. He pitched in 95 in the division series against the Mariners. David Cone won 20 games that year in his age 35 season. He was 20-7 with a 3.55 ERA in 207 innings pitched. Each of the Yankees' top three starters, Pettit, Wells, and Cone, each had over 200 innings pitched. And you rarely see a Yankees pitcher throw 200 innings anymore. I think they're pretty protective of those arms. Fat Pussy Toad, as named by George Steinbrenner, the late Hideki Arabu. I was excited when Arabu came up. I thought he was going to be the Japanese Nolan Ryan, as they said. He actually had an okay year in 1998. He was the pitcher of the month in May of that year. Let me pull up his May stats. Bear with me just a second. I know that he got off to a rough start in 1997. He was 5-4, had an ERA over 7. And then in 1998, nobody really knows what to expect. Was he going to be that dominant pitcher from Japan that was so hyped when he was acquired from the Padres? Or was he going to continue to suck as he did in 1997? In May of 1998, he made 6 starts. He was 4-1 with a 1.44 ERA. In 43 innings, he had 29 strikeouts, did have 21 walks. He walked a lot of guys. He nibbled. Only gave up 2 home runs, though, and home runs were the big bugaboo for him in 97. Through, it looks like, July 17th, Arabu was 9-3 with a 2.86 ERA. So he got off to a solid start. His ERA was as low as 3.07 on August 10th, at which point he was 11-5. He was coming off an outing where he pitched against the Minnesota Twins and went 7 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 4 strikeouts, 2 walks. He was good when he was on. Unfortunately for the Yankees, he wasn't on that much, and he wore down the stretch. In September, he gave up 6 runs and 5 runs in successive starts to the White Sox and Blue Jays before throwing 8 shutout innings against the upstart Rays, and then 8 innings of no earned run ball against the Cleveland Indians, and then once again against the Rays in Game 162. He pitched the 6th and 7th innings in relief and pitched 2 innings and gave up 4 hits and 2 runs, 3 strikeouts, finishing with a 4.06 ERA. Not a bad year, honestly, from a number 4 starter. Number 5 starter for most of the season was Orlando Hernandez. He came up, he was actually acquired from Cuba, and he came up early in the season to replace David Cone after David Cone had been bitten on the finger by a Jack Russell Terrier. Orlando Hernandez was 12-4 with a 3.13 ERA, and he came up big in the postseason. He pitched 141 innings that year, 131 strikeouts, just 11 home runs allowed. He had all those funky angles and would throw his fastball and his slider from a couple of different angles. He had that big eephus curveball. Didn't throw it a lot. I remember he threw it in, maybe it was 2001, and A-Rod hit it about 900 feet, and it landed over by those ambulances that they used to park out near the left field bleachers at the old Yankee Stadium. The only other player I saw hit one out there was Jay Buhner. Bullpen, obviously anchored by Mariano Rivera in his prime, age 28. He was 3-0 with a 1.91 ERA, 36 saves. Didn't get a lot of saves because they didn't need him a lot. The Yankees were just blowing people away. Pitched just 61 innings, had 36 strikeouts, 17 walks, gave up 3 home runs. His cutter really came into full bloom that season, and he didn't want to strike people out. He wanted to get quick outs, efficient outs. Ramiro Mendoza, perhaps the most underrated pitcher on the Yankees pitching staff that year, 10-2 in his age 26 season, appeared in 41 games, made 14 starts as a swingman, 3.25 ERA, pitched 130 innings, had just 56 strikeouts. He was a sinker pitcher. He was akin to Chen-Ming Wong, same type of pitcher, 90s, 93, 94, with a big sinker. The lefty in the bullpen was Mike Stanton. The righty was Jeff Nelson, both in their age 31 season. And Graham Lloyd pitched great. He was ultimately traded for Roger Clemens the following year as well. His age 31 season, 3-0, 1.67 ERA, pretty much a left-handed specialist, 37 innings pitched in 50 games. Other names on the roster in the bullpen that you may or may not remember: Darren Holmes appeared in 34 games. Mike Buddy appeared in 24 games, had a 5.62 ERA. Willie Banks, Ryan Bradley, Joe Borowski, Jim Bruschi, Jay Tessmer, remember the sidearm submariner. Mike Jerzenbach, that's a name I haven't heard in a while, 12.79 ERA in 3 games. And Todd Erdos. I think he was a hard-throwing righty that ended up in Texas. I could be wrong about that, though. So, great roster, but they began 0-3 in Anaheim. I remember those games were really wet, and they couldn't really get off to a good start because they hadn't played in a few days after spring training. Then they go to Seattle, and they win the first game. I remember Knobloch homered in the first inning, and I think maybe Strawberry and perhaps either Tino or Paul O'Neill also homered. O'Neill used to kill Seattle, especially in Seattle, and then Lou Piniella used to have his pitchers throw at him. They have that crazy home opener, which is on Yes every year. They win 17-13. Then on May 17th, Beanie Baby Day. I remember I was watching this game in my parents' bedroom because they had the nice TV. And I think my dad was working out in the front yard, and I kept yelling to him throughout the day, "Wells is through 6, Wells is through 7. When Wells had set down everyone, and he ultimately finished the perfect game on May 17th and got carried off the field. 2 days later was that brawl that really brought the team together against the Orioles. I remember Bernie Williams hit an upper deck home run to give the Yankees the lead off of Armando Benitez. Next pitch, he drills Tino Martinez in the back. Bench is clear. I remember Graham Lloyd comes running out of the bullpen just swinging, and then Darryl Strawberry sucker punched somebody on the edge of the Orioles dugout. It spilled into the dugout. So that was a really fun brawl. That was the highlight of the season. But really, the Yankees just cruised from there. At the All-Star break, they were 60-21. So 39 games over 500. And whenever the Yankees reach the halfway mark these days, I always kind of look back to the 98 season and compare their record to the, whatever the current rendition of the Yankees is to evaluate how far off the pace they are, because they've never been on that pace again. Though this year, if everyone stays healthy, this feels like one of those type of years. Let's be hopeful about that. The Yankees cruise until September. They kind of let their foot off the brake a little bit. They got roughed up by the Rays in Tampa Bay. And I remember Joe Girardi had to have a big closed-door meeting because the team was struggling so much. Backtracking a little bit, Shane Spencer hit his first 2 home runs on August 7th in Game 2 of a doubleheader against the Kansas City Royals. He was 5 for 5 with 2 home runs and 3 RBIs. He came into that game batting 176 with a 446 OPS and left hitting 364 with a 1.148 OPS. He was sent down to the minor leagues just 3 days later and didn't come back until September 4th. And he homered in his first game back. He was 2 for 3 with a home run against the White Sox. Listen to his numbers from September that year. From September 4th, which was his 14th game, through September 27th, which was his 27th game, his numbers were absolutely bonkers. He batted .440 in those 18 games with 10 home runs and 25 RBIs. And then he goes off in the playoffs. He hits a couple of home runs against the Texas Rangers, including in Game 1 off of Rick Helling, I believe. And then he homered again against the Indians in the American League Championship Series. So he was a big reason they reached the World Series. I don't think he did much in the World Series. He kind of slowed down against the Indians. And so Joe Torre made the decision to swap out Ricky Leday into left field against Kevin Brown in Game 1 of the 1998 World Series. And Ricky Leday hits a big bases-clearing double. Knobloch, of course, had struggled in the ALCS. He made that bonehead play where he let the ball roll away and he argued with the umpire and a run scored. He hits a big redeeming 3-run home run to tie the game at 5 in Game 1 of the World Series against the Padres. Tony Gwynn hit a home run in that game for the Padres. So did Greg Vaughn, who the Yankees almost acquired in 1997 as part of the Kenny Rogers deal. But Yankees really never looked back. They were down 5-2. They tie it up with a 3-run home run by Knobloch. Tino Martinez hits a grand slam into the upper deck to give the Yankees a 9-5 lead. And from there, the Yankees didn't look back. Game 3, Scott Brosius hits 2 home runs, including one off of Trevor Hoffman, Hall of Famer, to give the Yankees the lead. And they go on to sweep with a win in Game 4 behind Andy Pettitte. So 1998 was my favorite summer, which is also the title of Mickey Mantle's book about 1956. But 98 was my favorite year to be a Yankees fan. I'm hoping that we can supplant that with the 2020 season. This team is looking really strong. If everybody stays healthy, they got a real shot at that 114 regular season franchise mark, maybe even the 116 American League mark, maybe even the 125 mark, including the postseason. So look forward to joining you guys along the way. Tune in each week for an episode of this podcast. I will put the audio versions for every episode on YouTube, where I also do daily recaps of each game. So tune in, and here's to a great 2020. I'll see you next week.